We're here at the NCUA headquarters after the NCUA November board meeting with Chairman Debbie Matz. I wanted to thank you first for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
I wanted to start with one of the most important things that happened at the meeting, the budget for 2014. Could you explain why the budget has gone up this year to people who might have been concerned, like some of the trade organizations, about potential increases?
Certainly, that's a good question. First, I should start by saying that our budget is produced through a zero-based process. So every office starts with zero and has to defend every item and every line in their budget. And that's scrutinized at various levels, including the board. And the board sends it back over and over again until we feel that we have a budget that is as efficient and as lean as possible, but that provides the resources that we need to do the job. Even though the number of credit unions is going down, the complexity of the credit unions is increasing significantly. The existing credit unions are larger, more complex, and more sophisticated. What that means is that we need to have more examiners and examiners who are specialists in certain areas and who are extremely well trained to supervise these credit unions. So we could have just added more examiners in order to complete our job. Instead, what we did was reallocate resources. So we now have a shorter 40-hour exam in small credit unions, and we've taken the resources that we're not using in the small credit unions and reallocated them to the larger, more complex credit unions that are causing risk to the share insurance fund. As a result, we have not increased our number of employees. We haven't increased them this year over last year or the following year. So we've been able to hold our workforce constant even though we have so much more complexity in the credit union system. However, our employees have not had a pay increase in several years as a result of the pay freeze. So now that the pay freeze is lifted, we have included in the budget a reasonable pay increase for all of our employees, our bargaining unit and our non-bargaining unit employees. Part of our responsibility is to have pay comparability with the other financial regulators. This is an effort to maintain or attain that comparability. And so we feel that the budget is a very lean, reasonable, and very defensible document.
In the area of compliance, Congress will pass a law, the president will sign it. What laws are causing the need for the NCUA to possibly increase the budget in terms of compliance?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not so much the laws that are increasing us, that are causing us to increase our budget. It's really the growth and the complexity of the credit union system. The credit unions are getting larger. We now have 4 credit unions that are over $10 billion and others that are getting very close to that mark. We have over 100 credit unions that are over $1 billion in assets, and those require specialized examiners. Credit unions are also getting into more specialized fields. They're expanding their member business lending. They're asking for derivatives authority. They're doing more commercial lending. So we need to have examiners who can keep up with credit unions and actually stay ahead of them. And my goal is that the agency should not say no to credit unions when they ask for additional authorities simply because we don't have the staff to supervise them. So we need to make sure that we have the competence and the resources in our staff so that the credit unions can function in the 21st century.
One of the reasons I asked the question is because some of the some trade organizations with the trades like CUNA and NAFQ want the CFPB mortgage rules delayed. Is that something that NCUA examiners are going to enforce, or will they be delayed in terms of enforcement?
Well, NCUA, like the credit unions, must follow the law. And the law says that those regs, most of them, will be going into effect in January of 2014. So, of course, we will examine for them. Now, Richard Cordray, director of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, has said that he doesn't expect everybody to be in full compliance at that point, but he expects examiners to make sure that the financial institutions are making a good faith effort. So we will make sure that we are complying with the law and with his interpretation of the law. And we will start examining for them at the end of January.
One of the other big issues was the corporate assessment, which is zero. I wanted to ask you if that is mainly because of the J.P. Morgan $1.4 billion settlement.
That has a lot to do with it. We're very pleased about that settlement. Our attorneys have been working on that for several years. It seems like a great holiday present. And the timing couldn't have been better right before we were doing our budget. But it's the improving economy. It's the assessments that have already been paid and the settlements. And not just the J.P. Morgan settlement, but the other $300 million in settlements that we have been able to recover.
And how will the money flow through to the Stabilization Fund?
The money will be deposited in the Stabilization Fund. There will be an analysis of the different securities and a determination about how those funds will be allocated towards each of those securities. But ultimately, it will be deposited in the Stabilization Fund and will reduce the amount of money that credit unions owe to the Treasury.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you one more question about the CUSO Rule. We are running a story this week in which we source CUSO executives who say the new CUSO Rule is tough. It's overkill. That's how they described it. Now, how do you respond to that position on the CUSO Rule?
Well, it's interesting that they would comment on the new rule since they hadn't seen it. So I think they were responding to the proposed rule. But I think that the new rule takes into account some of the concerns that we've heard. We read all the comment letters. We made some changes to the CUSO Rule, important changes in terms of who has to provide information to our registry. We've separated CUSOs into those that we consider to be complex and high risk and all the others. So CUSOs that do back office work or insurance work and some others are considered lower risk, and therefore they will have a minimal amount of reporting to do, basically just information about their name, their address, very minimal information. The other CUSOs, which we feel provide more risk to the system, will have additional reporting to do. But we have tried to keep in mind that we want to be as focused as possible and provide as little burden to the credit unions as possible. And through this rule, the credit unions have very little regulatory burden.
I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Appreciate it. For the Credit Union Times in Alexandria, Virginia, I'm Nicholas Balassi, and thanks for watching.